we go.
Good morning. This is Kevin Koym with the VO Weekly at TechCrunch. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to have, as we mentioned in the previous sessions, we're going to start bringing back some globally recognized experts about what's happening in the world. You know, science, technology, and entrepreneurship together. Entrepreneurs with vision and values that are driven by visions and values can really make a better change in the world. And real excited to have one of my colleagues that's going to be speaking with us today. I'll tell you a little bit more about him, but welcome to the Venture Outfitter. Today's program is going to be slightly different than our previous ones in that we want to go ahead and start really taking world level experts and bringing more of them in to kind of speak about it. And what we'll do is we're going to hear a little bit from Dr. Joel Cuello, who's been doing vertical farming and algae biofuels. But before we hop into that, want to make sure that you hear all about DuoWorks here at TechCrunch. We just opened our office. We want to make sure we encourage you to come back into the office if you've gotten vaccinated and taken care of your protocols and all that sort of stuff. DuoWorks is the location that I originally opened up for, or the last location that we hosted TechCrunch itself. And I wanted to make sure that you know that we came back to this location at 183 in Mopac. It's one of the easiest places to access in Austin. And Linda Blackman, the woman who bought out the co-working facility, has made some special arrangements for TechCrunch members. So definitely take advantage of this type of stuff. One more thing too, we are doing a small fundraising for our nonprofit to continue the programs that we've been doing. The Inter-American Education Consortium is the 501c3 nonprofit that's attached to TechCrunch. And if you happen to follow me on Facebook, or what we'll follow up is we'll post this link into Facebook as well as the Slack channels. Part of what this is we do a lot of programs like you'll see in the photos that are represented here. You'll see some of the work that happened in the middle photo is in Palestine, or Ramallah, Palestine. The lower right is in Nigeria, where we're working with 10 different startups that we're building technology solutions for dealing with pandemics. Yes, TechCrunch was doing pandemic work before pandemics were cool. The lower left is in Lithuania. The upper left is in Mexico, and obviously the one on the very right is when we got recognized for the work we did in South Korea. So part of what makes it possible for TechCrunch to take its programs and its network into these other locations is strong support for our nonprofit that finances a lot of this type of work. Typically, as an example, in all the different examples there, I personally was not paid to be in any locations, but wanted to make sure that we actually took our programs into these locations so that we could actually take advantage of what's going on. And extend our networks of solutions to other parts of the world. Reminder, for community support, we deployed a mighty network. You can sign up for it for free at techcrunch.mn.co. Someone can post that into the chat right now. The main thing about it is, usually during the VO Weekly, we will have an entrepreneur sit on what we call the hot seat. And today's program, we're not doing that, but I want to make sure I remind you that if there's something that you need for your startup, if there's something that you need for the work that you're doing and making the world a better place, I want to make sure that you take advantage of the network. And you can do that in two different places. Post onto the TechCrunch Mighty Network. And also, we have a well-developed set of Slack channels. You can post a request into the Pound Request Slack channel and take advantage of, quite literally the hundreds of people that are on the network. And the main thing, the fire that you see in the slide is to represent two different things. The first thing is, I'll call it hot seat so that people can hop onto the hot seat and take advantage of the heat. But the other thing is to say that when we work together, like, fires that are really big have a lot of logs that are on fire. Same thing about entrepreneurs. Want to make sure that you take advantage of what's happening. And there's no reason for your startup not to have resources. A lot of times when you don't have financial capital to propel things forward, you can use social capital to drive things forward. And that's part of what TechCrunch is here to serve you with. So I kind of went through that really fast. And the reason is I'm real excited about introducing you to Dr. Joel Cuello. Joel and I met in Ramallah, Palestine, back in 2018, and then have been, interacting a bunch of back and forth since then. He's done, I'm going to read out his formal bio just to give you kind of a sense of who he is and stuff like that. But real excited to have him here because he's truly using science to make the world a better place. And he's going to talk about his model for how to build, these globally linked innovation ecosystems and emerging economies, but also the same concepts. Many of you have heard me say that, as an example, the healthcare crisis in the United States is not going to get solved here. It's going to get solved by some entrepreneur and technologist in like, say, northern Mexico, who comes up with a little device. You guys already know that you're solving these problems already, that you're going to blow that technology back into the United States. Let me introduce him. So Joel is the professor of agriculture and biosystems engineering, and director of the Global Initiative for Strategic Agriculture in Dry Lands at the University of Arizona. A globally recognized expert in engineering of sustainable biological and agricultural systems, his technical expertise is in both engineering and biology provides a platform for engineering designs in various agricultural and biological systems, with an emphasis on optimizing biological and agricultural productivities while fostering resource sustainability and environmental protection. Professor Cuello has designed, constructed, and implemented varied types of engineered agricultural biological systems, including those applied to bioregenerative space, life support, hydroponics, tissue culture, and industrial mass production of algae, plant cell, and microbial cultures for production of biomass, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, etc. He is the principal inventor of the patented algae photobioreactor series, but which, by the way, is what he was building in Ramallah to support that. And hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about that. The accordion photobioreactor, and is the creator of the minimally structured modular and prefabricated vertical farm design called the vertical green box. Professor Cuello is connected his postdoctoral research in the Controlled Ecological Life Support System Division at NASA, John F. Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and has worked in a U.S. National Research Council postdoctoral research associate. He's earned his PhD in agricultural and biological engineering with a minor in chemical engineering from the Pennsylvania State University in 1994. He has 2 MS degrees, agricultural and biological engineering and plant physiology from Pennsylvania State, and many other things. He's a lifetime visiting professor at GISAD of the Philippines of Los Baños. So he does this in the Philippines as well, and also at DeSalle University in Manila, Philippines as well. Joel, quite a mouthful. So I'm real excited about having you here today. I want to hand it over to you. And like I said, I moved kind of quickly through your introduction because I know you're doing really cool stuff. And I was when I started TechCrunch, I remember in 2003, on the little sheet of paper that I wrote down about the technologies that were going to change the world for the better, one of the 10 was, some of the work that you're doing in algae. And I know you think about both the agricultural systems as well as innovation ecosystems. Tell us all about it. It'd be great to hear. I'm excited to have you here. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. It's a privilege for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I'd like to say hi to everybody. So I'm just going to jump into this. It's an informal discussion. So anytime you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. But I chose this to be the title for today's presentation, Building Innovation Ecosystems. I kind of narrowed it down in terms of context, and that is for food security in emerging economies. But what I really would like to be able to impart to you in this presentation are the 7 vital strategies to building innovation ecosystems based on my encounter with the globalized world in the past, 25 years or so, in terms of my academic travels. But again, in terms of the presentation, I'm narrowing this down to the context of food security in emerging economies. So a brief background, I'm going to talk about some technologies, and then we're going to talk about those 7 strategies. So of course, we're facing an urgent planetary grand challenge, which is food. And that is mainly because our global population is increasing. We're currently at about 7.5 billion, and then in the next 30 years, by 2050, the middle of the century, it's projected will grow to about 9.5, 9.7 billion. So that would be tantamount to adding another Africa and another Europe on our planet in terms of population. And so to be able to meet the food demand in the next 30 years, the United Nations projects we have to increase our food production by 70%, and we have to double the crop production by 100%, or doubling it, increasing it by 100%. But that is already a tall order because currently food production already accounts for 70% of all freshwater withdrawals. It's already occupying or using up around half of all habitable land on the planet. And it's responsible, the food supply chain and the food production accounts for 30% of all energy expenditures. So if we're going to further increase our food production by 70% in the next 30 years, where do we get all of our vital inputs into food production? So that's a big challenge. So the only way that we could do so is through innovation. So we have to innovate. And unfortunately, there are innovations relating to food security that are already on the horizons, and some of them are already starting to be commercialized. And today, I just want to present quickly 2 of those. One is vertical farming, the other one is cellular agriculture. Now, these are not silver bullets. To be able to meet the food security demands of the planet, we need all innovations and technologies. We need a whole portfolio. But certainly 2 of those would include vertical farming and cellular agriculture. So I'm just going to go through quickly just to give you background on these 2 technologies or innovations. So vertical farming, the genesis of that really came from the space program, both of NASA, the US, and the former Soviet Union. This started around 1960s, early 1960s, late 1950s. And the idea is, of course, to be able to send astronauts in extraterrestrial environments for long duration space missions, such as on the moon and on Mars. And for Mars, it takes about 6 months to go there. That's the shortest time period. And then 6 months to come back. And then they have to stay there for 2 years to make the mission feasible. So we're talking 3 years altogether. The astronauts will not be able to operate by the picnic principle, like the former shuttle program, where they bring all the food, all the oxygen, and all the energy that they needed, and then they come back to Earth after 2 weeks. We're talking 3 years. So they have to be able to produce their food on site, and then to be able to recover as much as possible all of the input resources that they need for food production. So as Kevin mentioned, I did my National Research Council postdoctoral fellowship at NASA Kennedy Space Center during the Jurassic era, a long time ago. And I did that in a division called Controlled Ecological Life Support Systems. It's a fancy name for space farming. So that's the name of the program. And essentially, we were developing then biomass production chambers, such as what is shown here. This is the actual experimental chamber that was used at Kennedy Space Center. So this is a cylindrical chamber. It's completely airtight. The plants are being grown. This is wheat using without any soil. So this is hydroponic system. There's liquid nutrient solution that's providing the nutrients and delivering the nutrients to the plants. The temperature of the air is controlled. The relative humidity is controlled. The light is not provided by sunlight, but by electric lighting. So this was early 90s. LEDs were just starting to emerge commercially as artificial light sources at that time. So they were still even using here high pressure sodium lamps. But anyhow, NASA has successfully demonstrated growing in such a closed chamber all types of crops, cereal like wheat and barley and rice, all green leafy vegetables, tomatoes, lettuce, and so on and so forth, even potatoes and sweet potatoes. I continued that research in Arizona when I started as a professor here back in 1995. Now, Japan was the very first country on the planet that harnessed that innovation that was being developed by the space program and commercialized it here for the Earth's benefit. This was around 2007. I was invited by Mr. Uchiyama here on the left. This is closer than Narita Airport in Japan. And this vertical farm was under construction during that time, and they just gave me a tour. They call it plant factories. That's how vertical farms started to be known as. But now everybody's calling it vertical farms. So there are two models or paradigms for vertical farms. The first one is the warehouse type of vertical farm, kind of similar to that vertical farm that Mr. Uchiyama showed me in the 2000s. This is a commercial vertical farm in Japan. It's called Spread. And as you can see, it looks like a box or a warehouse. It's producing about 30,000 heads of lettuce per day. This is a different company, also Japanese. It's called Mirai. So in here, you can see that it's called a vertical farm because you have shelves of hydroponically grown crops that are placed one on top of another. So it's really vertical, and it saves a lot of floor area. Everything here is controlled similar to the biomass production chamber at Kennedy Space Center. The temperature, the relative humidity, the light is controlled in terms of intensity, in terms of duration, in terms of wavelengths or quality. There is no soil. The nutrients are delivered using liquid nutrient solution. So the advantage of this is that you're really able to maximize the productivity as well as the quality of the crops. And you're now able to divorce crop production from the geography, from the weather, from the climate, and from the season. So you can grow your crops at optimal productivity and quality 365 days a year, 24/7, and pretty much anywhere on Earth, which is tremendous. This is an American vertical farm, New Jersey, New York City area, Aero Farms. It's one of the leaders definitely in the United States as well as around the world. So this is very obvious here that this is operating like a warehouse type of vertical farm. Plenty is in the Silicon Valley area in California. It's also one of the leaders in the industry. Essence Grows is also in California. Bowery is in New York City. All right. So again, these are groundbreaking innovations because they save 80 to 95% of water compared with open field cultivation. You don't need any arable land because again, it's a closed environment. Requires significantly less land area because you're going vertically. Less fertilizer because you keep on recirculating the liquid nutrient solution until the nutrients are consumed, and you don't release your fertilizer into the soil and into the environment where they could leach into the groundwater. You're not using any pesticides, which is tremendous. It's a clean environment. Again, consistently optimal productivity and crop quality, 24/7, 365 days per year, independent of location, climate, weather, and season. And so I introduced this idea of Cuello's law to the industry as an aspiration, because whenever you have a tech-dense crop production system, of course, you shoot up, you really exponentially raise the productivity. And that should be true as well in terms of resource use efficiency by the crops. So I formulated Cuello's law, where crop productivity per unit resource use in a tech-dense vertical farm must double every 4 to 5 years. That's crop productivity per liter of water, per kilowatt hour of energy, per square meter of land, kilogram nutrients, cubic meter of volume, per hour of labor. So again, this is aspirational, but we are tracking data from the industry so that we can see the trend. And of course, the best scenario here is for it to follow Cuello's law. The second paradigm, so the first paradigm is a warehouse type of vertical farm. The second paradigm is the modular vertical farm. This is a German company, and this is the modular unit that they are promoting for a modular unit type of vertical farm. And just like Lego blocks, you can interconnect them so that you can have certain or various different types of geometric configurations. This is another company, Urban Crop Solutions. They have their own modular unit, and they can even put their units one on top of another. So you have a multi-story modular type of vertical farm. And of course, the most ubiquitous modular unit that's available out there is your classic shipping container. There are lots of used shipping containers around the world, and they could be purchased at a lower cost. I think it's about $2,000 for a 10-foot or so. And of course, you can retrofit it to be transformed into a vertical farm. And that's precisely what my lab group here at the University of Arizona did. We purchased a used shipping container, and we retrofitted it so that it would be a vertical farm. These are some of my students. And my students have grown all manner, all types of crops in this, rainbow chard, basil, kale, and so on and so forth. However, we're not, of course, using this as a commercial vertical farm. We're using this for education, demonstration, and also for research and original design. And in fact, we have come up with now 2 or 3 original designs of our growing systems for vertical farms, one of which is the Beehive Green Box. And I don't have the time to elaborate on this, but we have patented this. The other one is the Go Vertical Farm, which is really an automated type of vertical farm. So I'm sure you've seen that robot that's being used in Amazon warehouses. So I got the inspiration from that. So you've got your mover robot here at the bottom, and then on top of that is a vertical farming structure where you can grow the crops. And so you don't need people then to access the crops, they can move around. And there are different configurations in a multi-story building where you could implement this efficiently. All right. And the great thing about this is that you can provide sensors, all types of sensors for sensing humidity, pH, light, CO2, nutrients, to be able to monitor all of these important inputs or factors that are necessary for crop production. And you can collect the data, and then you can do data analytics and even some AI, implement some AI algorithms so that you can really maximize and optimize not only the growth and the productivity and the yield, but also the quality in terms of nutrient profile and flavor profile of the crop. So that's really a powerful innovation. So again, this, I already enumerated this, and these advantages that apply to the warehouse type of vertical farm equally apply to the modular type of vertical farms. So the second innovation that's really gaining ground currently is cellular agriculture. And under this, you've got cultivated meats and you've got plant-based meat. Now, I guess pretty much all of us, we like meat. However, and because of that, and because of the growing global population, since 1961, global meat production has more than quadrupled to more than 340 million tons. And that was made possible pretty much because of the intensification of animal agriculture. So animals or cattle or pigs, they're being grown really impact densities in certain areas here. And so, not surprisingly, about 65% of antibiotics in the United States are sold for use on farms. Because when animals are being grown this close together, if one gets infected with a disease, that disease can spread really, really quickly to all the animals. And so to prevent them, prevent that from happening, the animals are being essentially fortified with antibiotics, which is not a good thing. So despite that, only 37% of the global protein supply really comes from meat and dairy. The rest is from other sources like vegetables and so on. Yet more than 75% of land used for food production goes to animal agriculture. So I mentioned to you that we're already using about 50% of all habitable land on the planet for agriculture. Well, 75% of that is devoted to animal agriculture. Not necessarily for the space that's being occupied by the animals, that's actually relatively small, but it's for producing the crops that are needed as feed for the animal. About a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions are traceable to the food supply chain, but animal agriculture accounts for about 3/4 of those emissions. So how do you how do you make it more sustainable environmentally to produce meat? Well, one such solution is known as cultivated meats, also known as cultured meat or clean meat. And this is Mark Post. He's a professor at Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and he was the one who pioneered this. So his proposition is that instead of growing the whole animal or whole animals, which is problematic, why not just take some cells out of the animals, extract them, and grow them in the lab as cells? So you can proliferate the cells in the lab, and then after that, you can constitute them into meat with the right texture, the right flavor, and so on and so forth. And this would directly translate into significant fostering of environmental sustainability, because it means it would mean 95% less greenhouse gas emissions by the animals, 98% less land use, and 50% less energy input. So he started in about 2013, and now there are companies such as Memphis Meats, which is huge in San Francisco, that's doing the research to commercialize this. So one product is a meatball. It takes the cells 14 to 21 days to mature in bioreactors, and then after that you harvest the cells and you reconstitute them into your meat product. At that time in 2013, the cost was about $18,000 per pound of beef, because of course this was research. Now fast forward 5 years to 2018, and they were able to lower it down to just $11 per pound. Now that's still expensive, but you know, it's now 2021, so 3 years again have passed, and I'm sure that the cost now is much lower than that. The Association for Vertical Farming will have a conference in Munich in September, and we invited Mark Post as a keynote speaker. So I'm hoping that he will report on the current price per pound of the meat that he's developing. So these are some of the original bioreactors or photobioreactors that we have designed in my lab at the University of Arizona. We're using this for growing algae, but really nothing prevents us from using this same reactors for growing the beef cells or chicken cells that would enable the production of cultured meat. Again, companies like Tyson Foods, they're getting into the game. And this is a Singaporean company called, I can't see it because of the legend. I think Eat Just, that's the name of the company. And they're the first company in the world that received approval from their government, the Singaporean government, approval for actually selling their cultured chicken. Then the second one is plant-based meat, and I'm sure you've heard of the Impossible Burger, you've heard of Beyond Meat. So these are meat products not made of meat, but of plant materials. And again, you can grow whatever plant materials, including algae, because there are some algae species that are rich in protein in bioreactors. So when you implement those, this would translate into this similar breakthroughs as vertical farming is achieving. Significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, arable land is not needed, requires significantly less land area, significant savings in water, no antibiotics, 24/7, 365 days per year production, independent of location, climate, weather, and season. Now, there's a potential unintended consequence because, of course, these technologies are being developed mainly by the United States and by other developed economies. And this could significantly widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots among nations in food, given their large discrepancies in scientific and technical capabilities. And this is why something needs to be done in terms of outreach to developing economies so that they can be provided capacity building, so that they themselves as well could use the same innovations toward food security. So just a quick definition of food security, and this is from the US Agency for International Development, which really is similar to the one by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and other agencies around the world. So food security is having at all times both physical and economic access to sufficient food to meet dietary needs and for a productive and healthy life. So I'm a professor, so this is the entryway for me as to why I'm able to do what I'm doing is this matter of science diplomacy. As professors, we're allowed to do global outreach, and which is a form of science diplomacy. So this diplomacy as an institution of international relations is a means for forging scientific collaborations toward designing innovative, sustainable, and resilient solutions to foster food security globally. So that's really my entryway into having outreach to different countries. So now I'm gonna talk about the 7 vital strategies to building innovation ecosystems. The first one, of course, is providing linkage to science and technology innovations. As I have mentioned, typically the developed economies are the ones that are coming up with these really groundbreaking innovations. And in this case, relating to food security. And if they're not shared with the emerging economies, then again, there could be that wide divide or gap between those two sets of countries. So it's important to have this outreach in terms of linkage to science and technology innovations. And most academics like me, this is really what most are doing in terms of global outreach. So one case is Chile. I was invited there as a Fulbright specialist by a university in the south of Chile, all the way south in Punta Arenas, which really was the, what do you call that region? It's not the Antarctic region, it's the Patagonian region of Chile. That's torrid region in South America. So this is Punta Arenas, and this is Universidad de Magallanes or University of Magellan. And I was invited by the Antarctic Research Program. So again, it's typical outreach. I was invited to provide them capacity building in terms of research into algae. And by the way, they're interested in algae because they have algae, snow algae, in the Patagonian region of Chile, as well as in Antarctica, and they have access to both of those. And they would like to know what are the potential uses of that algae. And of course, we were looking into nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals as well, but they needed my help in terms of teaching them how to grow the algae and how to scale them up in bioreactors. And so we did that for several years, and it was a very fruitful cooperation. And of course, I was there as well to help advise a graduate student and then publish the results. So the typical academic activity. But I just want to point out that providing capacity building in terms of research and development, that is very important in terms of economic development. This is the path for economic development for most emerging economies that I revised from Rostow. So you start with agriculture and mining, and then manufacturing. Then you add innovation by adding manufacturing together with research and development. And then that then ascends to high-tech innovation, knowledge-based value creation. And this is what makes possible the building of the science and technology innovation ecosystem. So China really went through these steps of development in the past 40 years in a very dramatic fashion. So they started with, of course, opening a little bit of China in manufacturing in the early 1980s. And then they widened that, pretty much the whole eastern part of China. Then they made sure that they're not only doing manufacturing, but that they were developing their research and development capability as well. And now they're pretty advanced in that as well. And now they're able to innovate, and they're now able to produce their own or create their own value and create original innovation. And that puts them in competition, in a very competitive position to compete globally in the globalized economy. So research and development as capacity building really is crucial. So in China, I have a long history with China starting in 2000. I was first invited at Yunnan Agricultural University, but then my long-term cooperation has been with Zhejiang University, which is one of the top 4 or 5 universities in China. They offered me a lifetime visiting professorship award, so I'm supposed to go there once a year, but because of the pandemic, it's been disrupted. But again, it's really mainly on research and advising graduate students. Some of the graduate students there came to my lab for training and so on and so forth. And the focus was on algae production in bioreactors. Then we published papers and so on and so forth. Now, Qatar. Qatar is very interesting. Of course, it's one of the rich GCC countries in the Gulf. GCC stands for Gulf Cooperation Council. However, it is highly food insecure. So these are the GCC countries here: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain, somewhere here. So those are very rich countries, but they are highly food insecure because they don't have a lot of arable land, and their weather is not conducive to growing things. So they need help in terms of fostering their food security. But these are the countries in the Middle East where I've had over the last 20 years cooperation. But right now we're going to focus on Qatar. Their food imports in that region is about 60 to 90% of their total food consumption. This is a food, water, energy index that was developed by the Party Rand Grad School in California. So this is an index from 0 to 1. 1 is the maximum or the highest. The US has 0.94, indicating it's very food secure. But Saudi Arabia is 0.51, Kuwait is 0.39, UAE 0.45, Oman is 0.54. There's no data for Qatar, but I would expect it to be around between 0.3 and 0.4. So again, they have a lot of problems with insecurity. So about 7 years ago, I was invited by the Qatar National Food Security Program to help them come up with a design for a demo farm and industrial farms that would demonstrate some of these cutting edge innovations for crop production, such as vertical farms, and of course, algae production in bioreactors. But we had to design them so that it's a closed loop system so that the resources are conserved. So the output or waste stream of one becomes the input into another technology module. And I'm starting collaboration again with Qatar in terms with Qatar Foundation through the Quranic Botanic Garden. They're interested in vertical farming. Okay, number 2 is building government, industry, university partnerships. This is really key in terms of building innovation ecosystem, because in a lot of emerging economies, the government and the industry and the university are not in cohesive partnership with one another. And if you really would like to build a viable innovation ecosystem, you need to have these 3 actors and stakeholders in close partnership with one another. So case in point is in the West Bank, where again, Kevin and I met. Again, I've had a long history with them for the past 15 years, started with Palestine Polytechnic University in Hebron in the southern part of the West Bank. And again, this is mainly teaching and education and research. However, I got invited by the Palestine Higher Council for Innovation and Excellence about 4 years ago. And they invited me to a meeting where they presented the challenge that they're facing, which is on their animal feed, because the price of animal feed in the West Bank is just escalating. And it's a big concern for the farmers because then they may not be able to afford to buy animal feed. And as you know, in the West Bank, raising animals is very much a part of their tradition and culture. So what we agreed on is to grow algae, spirulina, which is rich in protein, and use that protein as a protein ingredient for animal feed, because that's a key ingredient for animal feed. So if that could be grown locally within the West Bank, then that really helps tremendously and significantly in addressing the problem that they're having. So growing them in bioreactors like this. However, I respectfully insisted to them that this should not just be a research project that is sponsored by the government. I really respectfully, strenuously insisted that this be a government, industry, and university partnership so that it really becomes a sustained and sustainable effort in the West Bank. And they agreed immediately to their credit. So I'm really happy about that. And so for the academic partner, we have Al Quds Open University. And this is the president of the university. They arranged it, of course, not me. But it was a learning experience for me. And the university has an experiment station in Jericho. And that's where I got to train some of the staff that they have in terms of growing algae, and also help them to set up their lab and to order the equipment and so on and so forth. So it was a fun experience. Then for the industry partner, they chose Aziza, which is in the northern part of the West Bank. This is an animal feed manufacturer, so we went to visit their facility, and they're very happy to cooperate with this project here because they would benefit from it as well. And so they were happy as well to lend their analytical laboratory for the analysis of the algae. So again, this is very important to be able to ensure that an innovation ecosystem gets built in any place. And we decided to build this joint Center for Excellence of Strategic Arid Land, Food, and Bioproduction. The initial focus will be on animal feed. Okay, I should be done in about 10 minutes. Number 3 is organizing growers associations.
No rush, this is worth-setting stuff.
All right, this is something that I learned in Saudi Arabia. Around 6 years ago, 7 years ago, a colleague of mine here at the University of Arizona, we were invited in Hail, which is in the northern part of Saudi Arabia, and it's one of the provinces that's an agriculture center. It's actually one of the bread baskets of Saudi Arabia, if you will. So we had interactions with the farmers, and they organized that we would have conversations, interviews with 3 or 4 villages in Saudi Arabia. And one thing I learned from them was that they were having problems in certain areas, such as linkage to the market. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. But one thing that's going for them is they're organized according to villages. It's it's their cultural and political organization. They've inherited it from their forefathers, from time immemorial, but they're organized. The farmers are organized into groups, into villages, where they have governance and they have self-governance. They have a sharing of resources, including land, including water, and so on and so forth. So in other words, they have the economy of scale, which is really, really crucial. Now, contrast that with a lot of emerging economies in Africa and Asia, and you will find that the farmers are smallholder farms. They're usually family units. And in this global economy, there's no way they could compete, and there's no way that they could be viable. They would only be taken advantage of by the middleman. But I learned that from Saudi Arabia that they have those organized villages, and I learned that from a province in the Philippines, also serendipitously. I was invited to give a talk in the central part of the Philippines at a conference, and I met the governor, that's Mick Patilia. And he was the one who told me that they're actually doing that in his province. So they organized, or he organized his farmers into cooperatives, or he calls them farmers associations. And then he connected with the Department of Agriculture, Department of Science and Technology to provide them with training, technical training on how to grow crops in a proper way. And then he connected them to markets such as McDonald's and other supermarkets and so on and so forth. So he was able to do this closed loop for the farmers. They're now organized, they have economy of scale, and they have contracts with the market. And so that's why they're really flourishing in his province. And he's got hundreds of these farmers associations in his location. So I was really happy to discover that. And that's become, I learned that by heart, and now I'm really recommending it to other places as well. So this is one of the farmers association. They call it Villa Consuelo. Another one is Lagrange's Farmers Association in the Philippines. And now in the Philippines, the Department of Agriculture has also invited me to provide advice because they're starting their urban agriculture program nationwide, and they're focusing on vertical farms. And this is Glenn Panganiban, who is the director for the national program. And I'm in close cooperation with him. And we have agreed that we would be implementing this farmers cooperatives or associations nationwide. Because again, if it's just a household effort, then there's no way that can compete with the global economy. And then one other thing is that we're connecting them to the market so that they can produce on a contract basis. And that would ensure the profitability and business security of these farmers associations. Number 4 is providing business and leadership skills. Of course, this is not our forte, this is Kevin's forte. But in the West Bank, at the conferences that we've been attending, they are actually doing sessions on entrepreneurship. So this is, I think, 3 years ago, in Ramallah. And these are Palestinian young people, and they're organized. They basically have a startup. And this is a competition here, part of that conference. And these are resource persons, they're Palestinians, and they're quite successful with their startups. This one is with Optima Design Automation. This one is Social Dice, which is a type of a social media company. So they're having these successful startups actually in Ramallah, although I think both of them are based in Amman, Jordan, not inside Ramallah, although they're employing programmers and the like within the West Bank in Ramallah. Okay, so now number 5, establishing linkage to markets, which is really, really key. So again, I mentioned Saudi Arabia. Yes, they're organized into cooperatives, but they have no linkage with the market. So briefly, in Saudi Arabia, for a long time, the farmers were subsidized directly by the government. They didn't have to worry about the market because it's being purchased from them by the government. They were getting paid handsomely. But then the government at one point said, okay, enough is enough. We're not going to do that anymore. So they were left to their own devices. And suddenly it's a global market. They're not only competing with other farmers within Saudi Arabia, but they have to compete with farmers from around the world. So that was a big challenge for them. And a lot of them were being taken advantage of by middlemen because they don't have direct access to markets in Jeddah, in Riyadh, and also in Dammam, which are the 3 major cities in Saudi Arabia. So they were at a loss, and that was the kind of help that they needed from us. In the Philippines, again, as I mentioned, in the central part, the governor kind of solved that problem by really linking the farmers with the market. So essentially, he took care of the investment, technology and innovation, management, markets, and marketing. So he essentially addressed all of these entrepreneurial needs of the farmers to be able to succeed. He provided capacity building for them, so then they could have all of those, operate the business successfully, and thrive. And again, that's the same principle now that I'm advising for the implementation of the urban agriculture program of the Philippines through in cooperation with the director of the program. Number 6 is fostering deepened cooperation among government units. So I mentioned at the start that there needs to be a close partnership between the government, the industry, and the university. But I found out that in a lot of cases, just within the government itself, because there are many departments, agriculture, science and technology, trade and industry, a lot of times they're not in cooperation with one another. They're not communicating properly with one another. So that is very key. And I found that in the United Arab Emirates earlier, like in 2014, 2015, there was the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. They didn't have a Ministry of Agriculture. And yet food security was such a consuming concern for the country. Within the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment at that time, they had a department, which is the Agriculture Department. And that's where I was providing advice. And this is the Minister for Climate Change and Environment. But now they have established a new ministry, which is the UAE Ministry of State for Food Security. Not only is it a new ministry, but it is coordinating with all of the pertinent and relevant ministries that have to do with food security. And in the West Bank, fortunately, and this is all to their credit, they established the Higher Council for Innovation and Excellence. And that really is an umbrella organization that covers education, national economy, development and planning, communication, transportation, even Office of the President and Federation of Businesses and NGOs. So that really they could have this multi-sectoral effort to foster innovation within the West Bank. And that's working. And that's Engineer Adnan Samara, who's the president of the Higher Council for Innovation and Excellence. Okay, finally is catalyzing regional national innovation ecosystem. So this is putting it all together so that you can have this national innovation ecosystem. So in the United Arab Emirates, when I started cooperating with them about 10 years ago, I noticed that Dubai has these cities. These are innovation cities. There's Dubai Media City, there's Dubai Medical City, some others relating to computers, everything. But there was not one for food. There was not one for agriculture. So when I was invited to give a keynote speech in 2015, this is during the UAE Innovation Week, I talked about the path forward for the UAE. And of course, I recommended the establishment of the UAE Agriculture Innovation City by 2020. And that will spur global and local companies in the UAE to design and commercially realize agriculture innovations for the UAE, the region of the world, and it will just put them in a very competitive position globally. Well, this year, on May 2, the leader of Dubai announced the launching of the Food Tech Valley in Dubai. So it's the same concept. I'm not taking credit for it. I'm not saying I'm responsible for this, but I don't know. I'm hoping that that idea trickled into the administration. But regardless, I'm very happy that they've decided to establish this Food Tech Valley, which will cover agricultural technology and engineering, food innovation center, research and development facilities, advanced smart food logistics, and also as an economic zone. Lastly, in Palestine, they're planning now on building the National Complex for Innovation and Excellence, which will include 6 centers for research and development, as well as entrepreneurship and innovation oases. And this is where I'm really going to connect Kevin with the Higher Council so that TechCrunch would be a partner for the entrepreneurship function. Of course, this is in cooperation with the Palestine Research Universities, but my mission is to connect this with the industrial parks and economic zones in the West Bank. And there is one, which is the Jericho Agricultural Industrial Park. And this is made possible through cooperation of the Palestinian government as well as Japan through JICA. And of course, with the approval of the Israeli government, because they can't do anything without Israel approving this. So this is the Jericho Agro-Industrial Park. And there's lots of room for expansion. This is one of the companies that are operating there. He is the CEO of Palulea, which produces some nutraceuticals derived from olives, which is very innovative. And there are some other companies. But again, if you can have all of these entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs in the West Bank, and they can innovate, they can have products, they can be based in this agro-industrial park, then that opens the global market for them, because that industrial park allows for export of their products outside of the West Bank to other countries. And again, that would help develop this science and technology innovation ecosystem here, which involves manufacturing, research and development, and again, value creation, which is innovation based on knowledge. And that's the same thing that I would like to propose in terms of implementing the urban agriculture program. And that is to innovate as well, using these farmers associations, link them to the local market, then eventually link them to the market in Southeast Asia and beyond. So that would become in itself a de facto innovation ecosystem. So here's a summary. Providing linkage to R&D innovations, building government, industry, university partnerships, organizing growers associations. So this is really organizing companies, but we're dealing here with farmers in the developing economies. They're usually smallholders and family units. We'll organize them into companies, the growers associations. So they'll have economy of scale and they can compete meaningfully. Providing business and leadership skills, establishing linkage to markets, fostering deepened cooperation among government units that are pertinent, and then catalyzing regional national innovation ecosystems through economic zone establishment, for instance. And that's my contact information, and I thank you.
Well, wow, Joel, this extremely exciting and inspirational, and you know, I think for everyone that we just heard, that heard this, as well as the people that will get a chance to watch the video about this. This is exactly why I got excited when Joel and I met. I'd like to keep on going. Sometimes we close up pretty quick on our times, but and I know that there might be a handful of people that need to drop out just because usually our slot is about an hour. But I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions as long as Joel can still stick around with us.
Yes, please.
Perfect. Yeah. And then I'll take some other questions as well. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 of them myself, and then if there are other questions, just queue up your questions in the chat, and we'll go through them. Let's see over here.
Joel, you should absolutely take credit for the agriculture city in Dubai, because that's, you know, what they do is they get these good ideas from folks like us, and then they go build it. And I saw that with the healthcare city personally. So you should definitely take credit for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Happy to help.
Perfect. Yeah. In fact, I've been meaning to pull, Omar is one of the venture partners at TechRanch, and I've been meaning to pull the 3 of us together to actually have some more discussions, as well as our nonprofit director, Susan, as well. So we'll have a chance to follow up on that. My first question, asking for entrepreneurs that have lots of, entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values like you are. How is it that you're managing all these different projects? I mean, this is insane. The number of stuff you've come up with, a handful of ideas, and you've developed a conceptual network on top of that, and then you're delivering, these agricultural solutions, but you're doing it worldwide. How do you manage all of that?
I have no idea.
No sleep, no doubt.
I guess I'm a juggler. I'm not I can't deal with just one subject. I guess the word is monomania. I'm not a monomaniac. I need to be dealing with a lot of things at the same time. So it works for me.
Understood. Well, then, given that you're actually leading all of these different innovations in agriculture, and these 2 different types of agriculture, and then more generally the innovation concept that you're pointing to, what are the barriers for adoption? I find out all the time with all the locations that I've traveled, or some of the locations I've traveled to, that are food insecure. What are the barriers for adoption for these concepts?
Yes. Okay, so again, through my interactions with farmers and other stakeholders around the world, this is why I formulated this concept of strategic agriculture. So this is linking farmers to all critically necessary upstream and downstream connections. So upstream would be innovation, investment, technology. Downstream would be market linkages, marketing, and so on and so forth. to make their business enterprise sustainable economically, environmentally, and socially. And so here we go. We've got investment, technology and innovation, marketing, market management. Depending on the location, really, one of these could be the entry barrier for farmers. One barrier could be, again, also the fact that the farmers are not organized to be able to achieve economy of scale. And so one has to look holistically at their situation and then really figure out how they're doing in terms of their access to investment, to technology and innovation, to business management, to the market, to marketing. And are they properly organized to enable them to be able to compete with economy of scale? And if not, then what could be done to remedy the situation? So those are the entry to the barrier to entry, typically.
Next question. Oh, I'm not sure that feedback, but the next question would be, so obviously you're going way beyond just being an academic, right? You're truly needing an entrepreneurial engagement with the knowledge. You're cultivating the knowledge at the university, but you're deploying it as an entrepreneur. I'm wondering, what are the ways that you engage? How is it you're engaged? Like, what's your go-to-market? In my world, it'd be, what's your go-to-market strategy? What is it that when you're doing these engagements, you're doing more than just publishing papers? What are you doing, like, to see your concepts take hold in these other countries?
Right. So it's more like a snowball effect, I think, in my case, because, for instance, with my involvement with Palestine, so I started there as an invited speaker at a conference that was sponsored by Palestine Polytechnic University. So I gave my presentations. They were excited by my presentations. The following year, they invited me not to a conference, but to, again, start cooperating in terms of teaching, education, and research in their biotechnology research department. And so we maintain our relationships. They keep inviting me back over the years. And then there was this invitation from the Higher Council for Innovation and Excellence in Ramallah. So that it's really relationships. And of course, with the value that you're offering on the table as well, which they recognize. So that's how it happens. And it's the same thing with Saudi Arabia. It's the same thing with China. Same thing with the Philippines. So it's pretty much the same. With me, because I'm an academic, it always starts with that, with teaching and research, because that's what I have to offer, at least initially. And like the one in Chile. I didn't know them. They didn't know me. They were looking for help, and they searched the internet, and I popped on the internet. Oh, this is a professor working with algae. We need to invite him. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. In fact, I'm a fan of Chile as well, given that 17 years ago, the first 1,000 entrepreneurs to go through a Tech Ranch program, way before it was called Tech Ranch, were actually in Chile. So I understand. So if you have, Ben, this is my signal to anyone else that's about to have a question or something like that. You can either put it in the chat and I'll repeat it, or I'll take a question or two from our audience. My next question is, so I'm certain that there are a set of fans that, just from the standpoint of, the entrepreneurs around Tech Ranch are driven by vision and values, right?
Yes.
And like really changing the world. I'm sure you have a fan club that's been created just by the people. I mean, I was already in your fan club, right? You and I talked about that when we met in Ramallah in 2018.
Well, but likewise.
Yeah,
I'm part of your fan club.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering, what's the best way for us to follow up and follow your work? Like, as an example, I won't announce the state, but there's a state in another country that I think that I want to send a follow-up to, and you and I can talk about that, but without announcing them publicly. What's the best way for someone to follow your work? Like, what's the best way to follow up, or like where you publish, where What's the best way to kind of take the next step of engaging in your work?
Yeah. So we publish, the thing is we publish with different journals because that's the way we do it. So it's kind of hard to compile them together. I have a website, but gee, that website is not user friendly. So I need to put together a website where I can really just put everything together in there so that I can just refer people to that website and everything will be there. That would be wonderful.
We still like to make sure that you get a little bit of exposure as well. And so if you have that one slide that has your contact information on it. Now, that being said, obviously to anyone that's listening, the relationship between what Joel's doing and what I'm doing, or what he's doing in the Biosystems engineering department at University of Arizona, and what's happening between TechCrunch, where we've been taking steps towards formalizing those type of engagements and really looking for ways to leverage off of each other to do that. So stay in contact with us because we're going to be staying in contact with Joel.
Yes.
Do you want to bring up your contact information slide again?
Yes. And Kevin, I can send you a copy of this slides here as well.
Please do. That would be
I'll do
wonderful.
that. Yeah.
I actually got a couple of different requests in the back channel a while ago saying, hey, can we get a copy of these slides? And I'm like,
yes.
I think so. But yeah, so even, I mean, years and years and years before, more than a decade ago, when I made my original list and all of technologies that I thought were going to change the world for the better, vertical farming and algae, biomass through algae that could be used for biofuels or whatever it might have been, like, whether it's feed source, feedstock or something like that. I have been looking for the right person to follow in those areas and was real excited to meet Joel. And so it's cool to see. I'll take a question or two if we have any from the audience. Like, is there anyone that's in the viewing audience that would like to ask a question or two before we before I either ask 20 more questions myself or anything else? Anyone?
Okay, so I have an algae question. I know that NASA has been exploring algae to protect astronauts from radiation. Is that part of how much of that is NASA's interest in growing algae for that purpose are these algae farms?
Right, yeah. So just a quick background. NASA, like in the late 50s, early 60s, they first considered algae really for food for astronauts. So they were growing a lot of algae. But then they realized that, there's a lot of ick factor to it. Particularly back then, astronauts were not really happy to eat algae as their food. And so they kind of abandoned that and they went into higher plants, for growing them as food for astronauts. But now there is recognition that growing algae is very good in terms of producing protein, which could be mixed with other ingredients for food, so that's fine for astronauts. And also it's very good in terms of gas exchange in a controlled environment system because it's photosynthesizing, it's capturing CO2, and it's releasing oxygen. So in a closed space, the astronauts will be breathing out CO2, and so you can use algae to regenerate that into breathable oxygen for the crew. Then there's the matter of radiation. I'm not very familiar in terms of what NASA is doing on that, in terms of using algae directly as a shield for radiation. But in all honesty, in my opinion, I'm not optimistic about that.
Okay,
because the ionizing radiation on the moon and on Mars is really strong. So you can't use an algae culture as a layer to protect the astronauts living inside using that. You need a much solid, stronger material.
Okay. Like I said, pop culture information.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions before we close up for today? Cool. Well, I tell you what, this has been real exciting, Joel, from a standpoint of what you're talking about. And I thank you again for coming to discuss with us these strategies, especially when at Tech Ranch we talk a lot about this whole idea of building shared prosperity, and taking on food insecurity is certainly a part of that overall process.
Right.
We're going to have you come back and tell
Sure.
us more in the future. I don't know how many weeks we have to wait before I get to ask you more questions and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm real excited about having you here.
Thank
real
you.
excited about connecting different parts of my team to you as well, because I've been waving my hand saying, hey, we got to engage with Joel more, mainly because you're truly doing groundbreaking work. And
thank you. Kevin, if I may, just one last remark. I got into this because I realized early on that technology alone is not going to solve the problem. And I've observed this in the Philippines and a lot of other developing economies is the government, okay, there's a problem. So the government would look and search for the proper technology, and then they would introduce it to the farmers, and pretty much that's it. Without the other needs of the farmers being taken care of to be able to create a viable business using that particular technology. And so I realized early on that it's not just technology. Technology is important and crucial, but it's only one of the components that are needed to be addressed to provide capacity building for the entrepreneurs to come up with a viable and thriving enterprise. And so when you boil it down, this is really an enterprise issue. It's entrepreneurship.
That's one I think would be very interesting. See how we can actually engage in the coming weeks to talk more about that. Obviously we saw the synergies in our conversations in Ramallah. I think as well, given the border states, Tech Ranch has a lot of activity happening across Mexico, and especially in significant conversations going on with the states of Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Chihuahua, which are only a hop, a skip, and a jump away from Tucson, where you're at. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yes.
And when we look at part of the immigration issue that the U.S. faces, is because people in Latin America many times are facing food security issues and are stuck because it's either a physical security issue or a food security issue or shelter, right? It's like all the fundamentals that has you give up where you're at to go looking for something better. But I'm pretty excited about what's implied by what we can do together.
Okay. Yes. Likewise. Yes.
Well, so let's. What we'll do is we're going to definitely have you back, and we'll. I appreciate you taking the time out today. Yes. Just in wrapping up, since we've gone over our normal hour, which I think that we're probably going to need to have the excuse because some of these subjects are so important. Food security is so important. We faced it here in Austin, Texas, with the snowpocalypse just a few months ago, where we had no water, no energy, and it showed us how frail the system in Texas is alone for supply chain disruption. You read about that any one of us is 9 missed meals away from total chaos. Supply chains get disrupted, and if you don't have your own ability to your own system of farming and stuff like that, it's fundamental, right? It's just a fundamental issue. So thank you, Joel. We'll follow up, and I'll be talking to my team specifically about that later today.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Yeah, so I tell you what, we'll just close up with saying a reminder from our sponsor for DuoWorks. If you're looking for space and you're moving back into Austin, moving back into an office, also different opportunities here. Please take advantage of this for sure. And let us know if you have questions specifically about what's going on here. We're going to start doing campfire events and other events here as well, now that things have really started opening up. And just the final words, let's go change the world for the better together. A group of entrepreneurs driven by vision and value. It's exciting to have scientists, entrepreneurs like Dr. Joel Cuello, who are actually giving us a blueprint that we can follow to really drive this work forward to the world. I'm excited about what this represents for our work together. So with that, we'll close it up today. If you end up wanting the link, today's program will be published via YouTube, and we'll get some notes out as we continue to formalize the VO Weekly program. Let's go change the world for the better together. Y'all take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.